This program contains graphic reenactments of accidents and injuries that some viewers may find disturbing. Construction and building site safety is everyone's responsibility. Whether you're new to the job or have 20 years experience, one accident can dramatically change your life and the lives of those around you. Safety should always be a priority, from the design and planning stages to every part of construction. The construction environment can be demanding. You may frequently find yourself on different sites with varied procedures and tasks, new people to communicate with, and changing pressures and hazards. Because your environment is constantly changing, you need to put in place the measures that will ensure your safety and the safety of those around you. This program includes risk assessment, knowing your workplace, electricity, fire, housekeeping, working at height, and excavations. Risk assessment simply means looking at each specific task and considering what is the safest way to complete it. This helps us become aware of the hazards involved in doing the job and taking action to prevent injury. As a building or construction worker, you are obliged to ensure you only carry out construction work you are competent to do, report significant risks, cooperate with others and coordinate work to ensure the health and safety of you and your co-workers. Ensure you notify a supervisor of accidents and near misses. And follow site health and safety rules and procedures. The aim is to develop a safety culture, communicating methods of work and ensuring everyone knows how to work safely every day. Before starting a task, it is essential to think of what is the safest and best way to do it. Documenting this helps in assessing the risks. There are 5 steps to completing a risk assessment. Document the activity. Assemble those involved in the activity and write down the tasks step by step. Identify the significant hazards. Next to each task, identify what part may cause injury to those doing the work or to anyone else nearby. Document the control measures. For each identified hazard, list the measures that need to be put in place to eliminate or minimize any likely risk of injury to those involved. Identify who is responsible. Document the name of the person responsible for implementing the control measure. And finally, monitor and review. Make sure the activity is supervised to ensure the documented process is being followed. The documentation should be reviewed whenever an activity changes, when there is a change of personnel, or after an appropriate length of time. This documentation provides a written record of the procedures to be used on a task. As it is a record that can be used in court, it should be signed off by the parties who have responsibility for the tasks. When risks are identified, control measures can be implemented and followed. These measures are known as the hierarchy of hazard controls. You must address each hazard with a solution from the hierarchy in the following order. Firstly, elimination, substitution, isolation, engineering controls, administrative controls, and personal protective equipment. Always address the hazard from the top down until the risk is eliminated or controlled. These control measures are often used in combination with each other. A hazard is something which, in context, has the potential to cause harm. A useful way to categorize hazards is to identify them as physical, chemical, electrical, and biological. Then look at each work area to see if any of these apply. A more direct way to consider hazards is to look for scenarios that might occur. Some common construction-related hazards are falling from heights, trapped by something collapsing or overturning, and being struck by a vehicle. These hazardous situations are likely to cause sudden and acute injuries. There are other hazards that may cause chronic long-term harm that must also be identified, such as contact with harmful substances, dust and fumes, exposure to noise, and vibration from handheld tools. However hazards are identified, it is almost certain that for any one activity, there will be many hazards. Each one has to be risk-rated, as each will need to be covered by the range of control measures adopted. When you are risk assessing, you need to record your findings in a systematic way, showing a proper check has been made of the inherent hazards and the risk rating for each. You must also factor in other activities that are carried out concurrently. These other activities might create hazards or make the risk of some greater. In a full assessment, these other activities must be taken into account. While companies might issue guidelines for common activities, you must also conduct site-specific hazard identification. Why do you think it is important to follow the correct order in the hierarchy of hazard controls? Construction sites account for a large proportion of workplace injuries and fatalities. To avoid becoming one of these statistics, it's a good idea to familiarize yourself with the work environment, and it is essential that you undergo an induction program. Before starting work and after a site induction, walk around and get acquainted with your surroundings. Check for any workplace hazards. Include any newly identified hazards in your site-specific risk assessment. Think about what you need to do in the job and consider what could go wrong at each stage. Take steps to eliminate these hazards and plan for an emergency situation. Identify where firefighting equipment is located and know how to use it. Locate the nearest first aid station and get to know who the first aiders are in your area. Familiarize yourself with the company's health and safety policy and understand the specific safety requirements of the site you are working on. Your ability to identify site hazards and assess the danger is vital not only to your safety, but also that of your workmates. What must you attend before starting work on any new site? Electricity adopts a path of least resistance, and you could easily provide that path if you don't take care. Be aware of these common electrical hazards: cracked or faulty insulated wiring, equipment that is overheating, operating electrical equipment in damp or humid conditions, and the positioning of overhead and underground services. Always adopt safe work practices when dealing with electricity. Before commencing activities, check to see that your tools are in good condition and are clean. All your electrical equipment must be thoroughly inspected by a competent person on a regular basis, and records kept of these inspections. Refer to your local authority or site guidelines for specific timeframes. Remember to keep power cords away from heat sources, wet areas, sharp objects, and any other area that might cause damage. Run cables at height to keep them dry and to prevent them from being damaged. Ensure that this has been approved by the site manager. Work should only be carried out on or near to live systems when a risk assessment has been conducted and shown that there is no alternative. When working near live power, you must use non-conductive wooden or fiberglass ladders. When working with electrical tools, residual current devices should be used for added protection. What are some common electrical hazards found on sites? The potential for a fire to break out on a construction site should never be underestimated. You need to be aware of possible fire hazards, such as electrical wiring defects, flammable vapors and dust, accumulated rubbish or flammable liquid spills, and hot work activities. When conducting hot work, ensure that it is carried out in accordance with the risk assessment using the designated areas where the fire risks are controlled, and ensure that you have a current permit. There should be no combustible material in the vicinity, and ensure that firefighting equipment is close by. Good housekeeping and the proper disposal of rubbish and waste material is a vital part of any fire safety program. You must know what to do in the event of a fire. Remember to follow the site's fire response procedures, and above all, do not panic. Know where fire extinguishers are located. It is important to use the appropriate type of extinguisher on the specific material which is burning. Everyday combustible materials such as wood, paper and textiles are best extinguished with water. Carbon dioxide extinguishers are good for general purpose use and are ideal for live electrical fires. Turn off or disconnect power before attempting to extinguish a fire with electricity present, if it is safe to do so. Dry chemical extinguishers can also be used on liquid and live electrical fires, but are not as effective on wood or paper as water. Do not use water or foam extinguishers on an electrical fire, as you could electrocute yourself. In any firefighting situation, if the fire does not extinguish quickly, raise the alarm and be prepared to evacuate. If the fire alarm sounds on your site, follow the site evacuation procedures. General guidelines are: turn off electrical equipment if it is safe to do so, stop working, and evacuate to the assembly area. Remain at the assembly area until everyone is accounted for and await further instructions from fire wardens. Find out if using hoists are allowed during a fire emergency on your building site. What sort of flammable materials are you using on a regular basis? Poor housekeeping does cause accidents at work. Protruding objects, exposed nails and rods, electrical equipment near water, or obstructed pathways are all hazards that can be managed by removing the problem or reporting it. Remember to keep platforms, floors, roadways, and work and access areas clear. Store tools, equipment and materials neatly and in their appropriate areas. Never obstruct access to fire extinguishers, emergency exits, or first aid stations. Water is a precious resource. Don't waste it. Use a broom rather than a hose to clean paths and gutters. If water use is necessary, high-pressure hoses are both water efficient and more effective cleaners. Use buckets of water to clean tools instead of running water. Plan your activities so nothing from your site, such as soil, sand and cement slurry, will directly pollute the stormwater system or nearby waterways. Cover or filter stormwater inlets and drains and keep them clean. Stockpile and cover building materials away from drains or roads. Make an effort to reduce the materials used. Reuse anything you can and recycle anything you cannot. Stack offcuts safely for reuse. Don't waste anything and use recycling bins. Separate all wastes at source and avoid cross-contamination. The use of certain building waste as landfill is an unlawful and unacceptable practice. Identify the location of waste bins and special areas for waste collections. Act appropriately with hazardous substances such as asbestos, chemicals, and lead paints. Keeping the site orderly will also help access and egress issues. Name 3 housekeeping tasks that will help make your workplace safer. An awkward fall could cause a major injury, even if it were from a relatively small height. If you are working at heights above 2 meters, you must consider it in a risk assessment. But even when working below 2 meters, you must consider the risks. Falls can also occur into shafts and pits, and this is still considered working at height. Openings such as holes in floors, gaps on working platforms, shafts and stairwells must be covered over, barricaded or fenced off. Before working at height, check with your site manager for the location of any overhead power lines and always remain aware of what is around you. Discuss any awkward access situations with your supervisor and take steps to control the risk. When working on elevated work platforms, make sure that they are situated on firm, level ground. Carry out your lifting in accordance with the manufacturer's recommendations. If the unit is fitted with outriggers, then make sure these are properly extended and on solid terrain. Always wear a safety harness secured to the platform by a short lifeline or as directed by the risk assessment. Be particularly careful when working from scaffolding. Scaffolds must be fully boarded with guardrails and toe boards in place. Scaffolds can only be erected, altered and dismantled by people with a certificate of competency of the appropriate class. Before commencing work, carry out inspections of the scaffold to ensure it is safe. If your risk assessment reveals the use of a ladder, ensure it is placed on a firm, level surface and keep both hands free for climbing. Carry tools in a belt or hoist equipment separately and safely to the work area. Lock off the ladder on both ends to make it secure. When on the ladder, do not overextend when reaching over. Climb down and move the ladder instead. A ladder must be correctly angled to maintain stability. As a rule of thumb, the ladder should be 1 meter out for every 4 meters up. Secure the ladder against a solid surface and make sure it extends over 1 meter above the landing platform. When working at height, be conscious of the safety of those below you. Toe boards, mesh infills, screens or other means of stopping falling objects should be installed. Be especially cautious when working on a roof. They have unpredictable footings. Follow your risk assessment carefully and stay alert to eliminating the hazards. What is a preferable alternative to using a ladder? Groundwork can be extremely hazardous. Common accidents that occur are trench collapse, objects falling onto people, contact with hidden surfaces, vehicles or workers falling into the excavation, and undermining of nearby structures. Proper precautions must be taken at all times. Always excavate using safe digging practices. Prevent trench collapse by either reducing the slope of the trench walls or installing a suitable support system for excavations over 1.5 meters. Store excavated soil or materials well away from the sides of excavations. Ensure you know where underground surfaces are prior to starting a dig. You may have to hand dig in order to locate surfaces. And be aware that drawings are not always accurate. Never dig an excavation over 1.5 meters deep without supports. Check for evidence of slides or cave-ins and ensure trench supports are secure. Excavations must be inspected prior to the commencement of work and following bad weather. They must be barricaded and prominent warning signs displayed. What measures can you take to control the risk of trench collapse? This program has demonstrated some of the risks in the environment you work in. The elements discussed are essential building blocks to ensuring a safe and trouble-free construction process. Be aware of safety in everything you do. Both employees and employers are equally responsible for identifying risks and hazards in your workplace and taking steps to eliminate them. Adopting the right attitude to safety is essential for you and your workmates to get the job done properly.